Okay, so we'll make a start there and we'll begin by setting a motivation. So we're thinking we're talking about the Mahayana Dharma, so we need to set the motivation goals with the categories of teaching. So we're going to try and have a motivation of bodhicitta. That's the most important part here. So think that we're discussing Lojong not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. And for that purpose, we will engage in training our mind, developing bodhicitta, and so on, up to and including achieving enlightenment benefit. So with that, we'll start with some introductory prayers. In fact, because today is the auspicious day of the eclipse, we'll do them slightly more extensively. So we'll start off with the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. So, Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, art, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, art, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, art, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When I was supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth. You paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, flame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, saviour to you I prostrate. With supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, colour like gold, to you I prostrate. Just free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the Teacher having all understanding, field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the wrong gone to dustness I prostrate. Beauty that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, sublime pure reality to the Dharma that pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated into the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue I prostrate. Do not commit any unwholesome actions, engage in perfect, wholesome actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a defective view, a butter lamp flame, an illusion, a dewdrop, a water bubble, dream, lightning, a cloud. See all causative phenomena like this. Do all these merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of fault, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. We'll just do the praise to the Shakyamuni Buddha. There's the praise of perfect wisdom. Masam Shumi Sheraparoji, Makemiga Namkin Yogoni, Sosoran Vigishi Choyowa, Tusongye Oayum Lachaselo. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva. And then we shall do a short mandala offering. Om Sashipoki Yoshimeto Tramira ni re ye hari sangye shindu mikte uwai dokuna dojila chogasho jesulam Dampakirnam Jokukai Kien se choosing tree Jita sampe tu ala Shagye Choki Shaka Bhaktu So Idangu Anamandala Kandiyatayami. And then refuge. Sangye Chodan Sani Chonam La Jancho Padu Dani Kyamsuchi Dagi Chonye Gipe Sonamgi Drola Penshi Sangye Rupa Sho Sangye Chodan Sani Chonam La Jancho Padu Dani Kyamsuchi Dagi Chonye Gipe Sonamgi Drola Penshi Sangye Rupa Sho Sangye Chodan Sani Chonam La Jancho Padu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chonye Gibe Sonangi Drola Penshi Sangye Trupa Sho. Okay, so then we'll move on to the main topic of today's teaching. So, Lojong, the Mahayana mind training. So last time we did an introduction to what Lojong is and why we need to practice it, and then started this precious Lojong text by Atisha, the Bodhisattva Garland of Jewels. So seeing as we've got more people that didn't attend last time, we'll redo everything. We'll skip the introduction, but we'll start the Bodhisattva Garland of Jewels again, if that's okay with everyone. So I don't have a PDF of the text I'm working off. I'm not quite sure why not. But you can find it on Lotsawa House, and I'll read the text out as we go. So start Bodhisattva Garland of Jewels. There's anyone interested in Jangship Sempa Nobu Trungwa Shuso. So here is included Bodhisattva, Jangship Sempa. Yeah, that's right. The text is on Lotsawa House, so you should be able to find it there. So last time we didn't do an explanation of the title, but maybe it'd be good to this time. So obviously, Bodhisattva, Jangship Sempa in Tibetan, made up of two. Yeah, sorry, Tenzin, is that better? Perfect. So Bodhisattva Garland of Jewels, Bodhisattva, Jangshub Sempa. So there's two main parts, Jangshub and Sempa. So Jangshub, then is made up of two syllables, Jang and Chub. So Jang is referring to the act of purification, sort of purifying negative deeds, and Chub refers to attaining all qualities, and that's enlightenment. All negativities are purified and all qualities are attained. Jangchub. It's quite deep and meaningful in just the name alone. Then next is Semper. And Semper just means being. So a Bodhisattva, a being of enlightenment. Nobu, refers to a jewel, something precious. And Trengwa is a garland or a mala. So it's it belongs to the Bodhisattva, this precious garland. And it's a precious garland because it's a text of 28 verses. So you can kind of consider it like a jewel garland, and each one is a jewel, and they're in a string of 28, and this belongs to a Bodhisattva. So that, in brief, is the title. So then we start off with the introduction. So, I make prostration to great compassion. I make prostration to sublime teachers. I make prostration to the Buddha figures, to those in whom I have belief. So we start off here with praising great compassion. So we know from other teachings, Chandrakirti starts off his introduction to the middle way by praising great compassion. He explains it like this: I prostrate to great compassion because the Dharma arises from the Buddha arises from the Bodhisattva arises from Bodhicitta arises from great compassion. So great compassion is the root of the Dharma. So we praise great compassion when we talk about teachings of Bodhicitta in this terms of Lojong, but also when we talk about everything else, even when we teach emptiness, we should praise great compassion. So on there, and we think about the sublime teachers. So, think Atisha received these teachings from Salingpa in Indonesia. So he's received these from his teacher, and then we've all received teachings from our great teachers. And it's beginning like Lamrim, like Tsongkhapa's Lamrim, not like Atisha's Lamrim, slightly different. But most Lamrims in the Tibetan tradition start with Guru devotion. So in that way, the teachers are important for this. Then they make prostration to the Buddha figures, those in whom I have belief. So here we're talking about, Yidams and so on. In this context, Atisha have been talking about the four Kadam deities of Shakyamuni Buddha, Chenrezig, Tara, and Achala, who cover the four actions, Shakyamuni because he's the teacher of the Dharma, Chenrezig for great compassion, Tara for enlightened activities, and Achala for protection and removal of obstacles. So in this sense is what Atisha is talking about here. But it can also be any Yidam Bodhisattva son that you have faith in. And the faith isn't kind of blind faith, your devotion just because someone says they're enlightened. We're talking about this very positive form of faith where we're seeing their good qualities and we want to follow their example, practice deity yoga and have the liberation of their good qualities. Okay, so then that covers the title and prostration. So next, we go to verse number 1. So he says, let me rid myself of all this indecisive wavering. Let me rid myself of all indecisive wavering and cherish being wholeheartedly earnest in my practice. So let me rid myself fully of being sleepy, foggy-minded, and lazy, and always make effort with perseverance. So I won't go into as much detail as last time. You can catch up on the recording if you want the details. This first verse is about calm abiding. Indecisive wavering, being doubt about do I want to practice? Do I not want to practice? Is this practice right? What about doing this practice instead? We just need to get the teachings and sit down and actually practice. And then sleepy, foggy-minded, lazy. These are the faults for calm abiding, and effort, joyous effort is the antidote to these, as well as, proper rest and so on for sleepiness. In a way, saying sleepy, we're talking about not being bothered, and foggy-minded when you're too tired to think clearly and actually practice, and lazy, procrastinating, thinking you'll do it tomorrow or you'll do it later, or just not having the self-esteem necessarily, thinking you're not good enough for the practices when if you receive teachings you are. So then on to verse 2. Let me always safeguard the gateway of my senses with mindfulness, alertness, and care. So let me check repeatedly the flow of my mind 3 times each day and each night. So again, we're kind of talking here about the antidotes to the faults of calm abiding. So mindfulness, alertness, and care can also be mindfulness, alertness, and conscientiousness. Mindfulness, watching your mind, alertness, seeing as it changes, and distraction, watching distraction arise, and kind of like the guard raising the alarm. And then conscientiousness is returning it back to the object of meditation. So if you start doing calm abiding on the breath and you notice with mindfulness that your mind starts to wander and think about noises outside, then alertness is catching that as soon as you can. And then conscientiousness is returning to the object of breath as soon as you can. And then check the flow of my mind 3 times each day and each night. So this is a way of saying constantly checking your mind. It's not that we need to sit down every 4 hours and say, so what's my mind doing? What am I doing? It's about constantly trying to constantly have mindfulness and just checking every so often. What are my vows? Am I holding them? What do I need to do differently? And as a beginner especially, it's useful, to maybe every 4 hours, as it kind of says, 3 times each day and night, depending on when you get up and go to sleep, whatever, you can kind of figure out those 6 points. But you can also, just every hour, every 2 hours, however often you feel like it's quite beneficial to just stop, think, okay, so I'm doing this and that's okay with my vows, and move on. So then verse number 3, let me make my own failings be known and seek not mistakes in others. So let me keep my own good qualities hidden and make the good qualities of others be known. So what we're talking about here again is kind of confession. We've got to, if we we break our vows, we degenerate our vows in any way, we need to confess them and then use the opponent powers to purify them and stop things getting worse. And this is kind of the opposite to worldly life. We like to hide our mistakes. So it's really important to practice this and just keep an eye on our mind, check where we're at. And yeah, if we confess, we can improve. And that's the main point. And then by the end, keep my own good qualities hidden and make good qualities of others be known. So if you praise people for doing good things, it generally improves the mood of them, yourself, just everyone in general. So it's quite good to do these kind of rejoicing practices and sharing. But also if you constantly talk about all the good deeds you're doing, oh, I attended this retreat, I attended these teachings, I did this practice, I made these offerings, you very quickly can develop pride, which is then very negative, and then all this dharma becomes non-dharma because it's just polluted by the worldly concerns. So it's really important in this way. So verse 4, let me rid myself of desire for material gain and honour, and always rid myself of desire for profit and fame. So let me have few desires, be content, and show appreciation for kind acts that have been done. So in a similar way, we're talking about calm abiding again. If you in general life as well, it's going to be applied to, but Atisha is more specifically talking about calm abiding here. And we're saying if you've got few desires and the mind's at peace, it's a lot easier to attain calm abiding. So and then aside from calm abiding in daily life, if you're not worried about gaining some possessions and, under the control of the worldly concerns, you want people to praise you, you don't want to criticize you and so on. Generally, you find you're a happier person. So Okay, so verse number 5. Let me meditate on love and compassion and stabilize my bodhicitta aim. So let me rid myself of the 10 destructive actions, makes myself stable always with belief in that. So the 10 destructive actions, we're talking about the 10 non-virtuous actions, the ones of body, speech, and mind. And if we constantly create negative actions, negative karma, we're not going to be able to achieve enlightenment. And you think as Bodhisattva, our aim is to liberate all sentient beings, and thus we need to become a Buddha and progress on the paths ourselves. If we're committing non-virtuous actions, holding ourselves back, and then we're not able to help beings properly. And then make yourself stable always with belief in fact. It's having enough faith in the Buddha Dharma. If we have faith in the Buddha Dharma, we'll actually practice constantly. And this is kind of what we're aiming for. We don't want to be discouraged in our practice, so we need to have faith it's the right method. Okay, so now verse number 6. Let me overcome rage and pride and come to have an attitude of humility. So let me rid myself of dishonest ways of living and make my living with a livelihood that accords with the Dharma. So when we're saying we're overcoming rage and pride, we're overcoming anger and pride, yeah? So obviously anger destroys all our virtue. It's a moment of anger is enough to destroy all our virtuous karma. So we need to be careful to avoid it. Now, if you dedicate and so on, it's said it's protected. So it's also why it's important to dedicate after any virtue. And then pride, because if we're a very proud person, we cannot improve because we don't think there's anything wrong with ourselves. So we can't progress along the path and even practice generosity and so on and develop these good qualities. And then we talk about, so we're saying about having an attitude of humility, kind of saying, if you think you're not the best, you think you're able to improve, you'll be able to practice the Dharma properly. And then my teachers have said here that while it specifies overcoming anger and pride, we're talking about all negative emotions, all these afflictions, and they're all they're all something we want to avoid, but anger is the strongest and the most important to remove. So if we have anger in our mind, we need to practice the antidote of patience, and this protects virtue as well. So really, you can see that we need to practice patience if we want to protect our good karma we generate. And to do that, we need to contemplate the faults of anger and the benefits of patience and so on. So we won't go into that now because, practice of patience of its own is a big topic, takes us away from the text. And then continuing in verse 6, so let me rid myself of the dishonest ways of living and make my living with a livelihood that accords with the Dharma. So we're talking about the dishonest ways of living is the 5 forms of wrong livelihood. But beyond that, we need to think about the eight worldly concerns, and we can have any job we want. But if you're attached to praise and worried about criticism and you want wealth and don't want, you want to gain possessions and don't want to lose anything. If you're focused on the eight worldly concerns, no matter what job you do, even if you're a monk, it's not very beneficial. So, yeah, we need to make sure we abandon the eight worldly concerns in all our practice for it to be the most benefit for everyone. Then, verse 7. And let me rid myself of all material burdens and adorn myself with eyes gems. So let me rid myself of all bustling activities and live in seclusion. So when we say rid myself of all material burdens, we're kind of not saying we need no possessions, because clearly we do need possessions to live, especially as a lay person, you need possessions. But we're kind of meaning not being attached to things and not worrying about having more of certain items or avoiding others. We want to train ourselves to be free from attachment in this way. And then we adorn ourselves with an Ayu's gems. So these Ayu gems are 7. So it's the 7 Ayu gems are faith, morality, generosity, listening, embarrassment, shame, and wisdom. So obviously faith is about having faith in the Buddha Dharma. Morality is keeping whatever sets of vows you hold, whether it's Patimoksha, Bodhisattva, or Vajrayana. Generosity is obvious, practicing generosity. Listening refers to listening to the Dharma and putting it to practice, and the kind of applies to wisdom later. And then fifth, embarrassment's a bit harder. So, we think of it as quite negative in the West. The two, embarrassment and shame, are quite negative emotions in the West. But when you talk to Tibetans, they mean different things here. So we're talking about kind of embarrassment and shame about breaking your vows. You should be embarrassed to break your Patimoksha vows, for example. It should be a source of shame for you. And in that way, it's talking about keeping your vows because you don't want to embarrass yourself. And that's cross-cultural. No one wants to embarrass themselves. And how can we avoid embarrassing ourselves? That's by keeping our vows. And then 7, wisdom. So we're talking about the 3 kinds of wisdom: the wisdom of hearing, the wisdom of contemplation, and the wisdom of meditation. So, right now we're undergoing the wisdom of hearing. We're listening to the Dharma. And then maybe afterwards you'll do the wisdom of contemplation if you think about what we've discussed and kind of think over the meaning. Okay, so Lobsang said this, and what exactly does he mean? He said Bodhisattva is Jangchu Senpai, Janchub, but Jang removing of negativities and Chub acquiring all qualities. So what does this mean? So I need to purify my negative karma, I need to accumulate merit. And then from there, once you've got a bit of an understanding, you go into wisdom meditation. And you'll practice calm abiding, and you'll generate a bit of concentration. And then you'll remember the kind of conclusion you reached from the contemplation and focus on that. So let me rid myself of all bustling activities and live in seclusion. So here we're talking about, not necessarily living in an isolated place in a cave like Milovape. Not everyone can do that. But we're talking about the seclusion of body, speech, and mind. So exclusion of bodies, putting yourself in a cave or a retreat hut. Seclusion of speech, might be doing a silent retreat or limiting what you talk about to just the Dharma, for example, during a retreat. And then finally, sort of retreat of the mind, the most important, and that's removing your mind from the 8 worldly concerns and just not being swayed by the worldly dharmas. So that's the most important. There was the quote by Dujon Rinpoche, where he talks about you can be sat in a retreat hut, but if your mind's in the market, you're not practicing the Dharma. And you can be sat in the market, and if your mind's in the retreat hut, you're practicing the Dharma. So that's the kind of thing we want to aim for. We don't need to go somewhere isolated and difficult. Of course, it's very beneficial to if you can, but not everyone can. So in the Tibetan, you see it says Gompa, isolated place. So this is quite, we refer to Dharma centers in the West as Gompas. Yeah, it's not necessarily, the true use of the word. A center in the city centre is not a Gompa. But monks and nuns are supposed to live in remote places. They're meant to live in Gompas. So you can kind of see this is what Atisha's getting at about being isolated from worldly affairs and thinking about the Dharma. So let me read myself, verse 8. Let me rid myself of idle words and restrain my speech. So when I see a sublime teacher or learned master, let me extend my service with respect. So when we talk about restraining your speech, it's talking, preventing negative speech, not speaking harshly about people. It was written in Sanskrit and then translated from Sanskrit to Tibetan when Atisha went to Tibet. So restraining speech, if you avoid negative speech, you cut out 3 of the 10 non-virtues straight away. And it's really important. We kind of abandon wrong speech because especially divisive speech. Divisive speech is a cause of divided communities and difficulty attaining calm abiding. So it's really important that we avoid this. And actually in the Tibetan as well, it's the text I'm relying on here, it says dampa, sort of to bind, to commit. So that's so you kind of, you're stopping negative speech arising. And then when you're extending service with respect, it's what we're talking about with the Lamrim, correct devotion to the Guru, not just outwardly praising the Guru and so on, but actually practicing the Dharma and putting into practice what they've taught us. And then as well, it says sublime teacher or learned master, Lama, heavy in qualities, they've got greater qualities than us. Shantideva says about all sentient beings are our teacher, because they can teach us compassion, they can teach us patience, and so on. So we should treat all sentient beings with respect, and that's really important. You can't say you're a Buddhist and you do all these great things and you treat your teacher with respect if you then go and verbally abuse some staff in a restaurant afterwards or something. You've got to be practicing at all times. You can't just be selective and do it just for those high lamas and other Buddhists and ignore everyone else. So verse number 9. As for persons with the eye of the Dharma and limited beings who are beginners, let me expand my discernment of them as my teachers. So a person with the eye of the Dharma is someone connected to the Dharma. And it's our teachers and so on, those who have studied and practiced well. And then limited beings who are beginners, all of us sentient beings who are trapped here in samsara, just bumbling on through, unaware of what we're doing. And again, this is kind of linking to the last point and what Shantideva was saying about seeing our beings as our mothers and developing bodhicitta. and just seeing them all as our teacher, and being respectful to them all. Mhm. Okay, yeah, so whenever I see limited, verse number 10, whenever I see any limited beings, let me expand my discernment for them as my father, my mother, my children, or grandchild. Let me rid myself of misleading friends and trust myself as spiritual friends. So when we say any limited being, we talk about a sentient being. That's the particular translation being used here. And that's what I was just checking. So it's talking about sentient, a mind possessor, an ordinary sentient being. And then we're saying discerning them as your father, your mother, child, or grandchild. So this is kind of the first stage of beginning bodhicitta. We think about all sentient beings as being our mother. And when we're Atisha's giving the example of father, child, and grandchild as well, it's maybe because for certain individuals, it's easier for them to develop bodhicitta based off the relationship with their father or their own children or so on. And then, so let me read myself misleading friends. So these are people who discourage sort of Dharma activities. So Dikpa and Dropa, where so we're saying non-virtuous friends who engage in lots of negative deeds and they dissuade you from the path. People who aren't interested in the Dharma, who like to, not everyone who's not interested in the Dharma, but people especially who are maybe hedonists, who kind of think this life's all you've got, so you may as well enjoy yourself and ignore morality, steal, cheat, whatever, as long as it brings you happiness, it's okay. Those are the kind of people you want to avoid. And you're saying, entrust myself to spiritual friends. And again, the Tibetan here is Gewa Shenyan. So, Gewa Shenyan, literally, Gewa virtue, Shenyan, friend. So, this is what makes Geshe of the degree. But we're talking about people who practice virtue. Anyone who practices the Dharma, or if they're not a Buddhist, they still go around, carrying out virtue. And it's quite important we're not partial here. You'll meet people of other religions who are more compassionate than certain Buddhists, for example, who commit good deeds. So we shouldn't be very stuck on, oh, but they're a Christian, so it's not good enough. But if they show more compassion than other Buddhists, they're a better person, really. Okay, so verse 11, let me rid myself of hostility and uneasy mental states and go happily everywhere. So let me rid myself of whatever I'm attached to and live without attachments. So Gyaltse taught an example, a later Kadam master, and he's especially important in the Lojong lineages, said, if we are free from attachment, we are happy. Sorry, no, sorry, I misread this quote. So it's not from Gyaltse taught example. My teacher said this, and if we're free from attachment, we are happy like Gyaltse taught example. If you see it in the lamas, lamas Open Pache was very unattached to things. So if something went wrong, he just whatever, he wasn't bothered. If something went right, he would be happy. But he was never unhappy and suffering because of it. He was just expressing this joy. And even amongst sort of ordinary beings, sentient beings, you can see if you're attached to something, you're so worried, you worry about, you say, your mobile phone, you have strong attachment to it. You've got to know where it is all the time. You're worried about it. If you can't find it, you worry. Where is it? And it bothers your mind. You can't have peace because you're always thinking about it. Whereas if you're free from that kind of attachment, you can have a bit of peace in your mind and be happy. Yeah, here in the Tibetan text, it literally says, Gewa draw, go happily. So go happily everywhere, it's talking about going around daily life, being happy, actually being able to move happily. Then verse 12, with attachment I won't attain even a happy rebirth, and I'll cut off the life of my liberation, in fact. So wherever I see a Dharma measure bringing happiness, let me exert effort always in that. So here we're talking about attachment. If we're attached to objects, it's so easy to commit non-virtuous actions. You harm others because you don't want. Yes, so I'll answer in a second or so. So yeah, you can, you'll harm others with attachment. If you're worried they'll take it, you might harm them, and then you might hurt people because you want something and you go out your way to get it and step over them. That's what it's talking about here, about won't have happy rebirth and you'll cut off the life of my liberation because you'll commit non-virtue. And if you commit non-virtue, you'll have future suffering. Wherever I see a Dharma measure for bringing happiness, exert myself. Effort always in that. So it's kind of talking about practicing morality again. We're going to work for sentient beings and putting effort into working to benefit beings. But actually, it's more relaxing. Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, living in morality is the real way to relax. People asked him how he relaxes, and that's what he said. And it's true, if you were in your vows, you can be content and you can be happy. It's quite easy to be, the Buddha taught these not to be really strict and, you got to worry about this, that, and whatever, but as a way of helping you have a happy mind. Yeah, so it also asking you to enjoy it when you're not attached to it. Yeah, so there's a nice quote here from Tilopa. And he says, attachment's not your uh, pleasures are not the problem, your attachment to them are. Or I'm paraphrasing that, I think. What Tilopa's really saying here is, you can enjoy things. You can enjoy going to the cinema and go and have a nice meal or a cup of tea or whatever. But if you're attached to them, they'll bring suffering because they'll end and you won't be happy. But if you're not attached to them, you can enjoy yourself while doing them. Then they end, is the nature of impermanence, the arise, abide, and cease. But then when they end, you just relax and go, well, it was the nature of it, it's going to happen. Where's the use of worrying? It'll come back. And you see these enlightened beings, they're free from attachment, but they enjoy themselves. They express happiness with nice views and so on. And explain. So it's not like you're severed attachment and it's just miserable. So I'm going to verse 13. Whatever I've undertaken to start with, let me accomplish that very thing first. Everything this way will get accomplished well, otherwise neither will come about. Kind of Atisha's talking here about keeping focused, I suppose, and not jumping around. If you attend, I'll do this practice. Oh, I'll do this practice. Oh, I'll engage in this data yoga. Or I'll do, I'll do Chenrezig. I'll do Tara. I'll do Shakyamuni Buddha. I'll do Achala. Or I'll do Lojong. I'll do Lamrim. If you jump around too much, you'll see you don't actually benefit all that much. You move a bit too fast. It's not very beneficial. Whereas if you stop and you go, okay, I'll do Lojong, then you finish. And then, okay, I'll do Lamrim. Then you finish. Okay, I'll do Chenrezig. And then you practice Chenrezig for a bit, And then well, I'll do Tara. And you maybe do a retreat on Tara and fire puja and so on. And you think, okay, I'll do Shakyamuni Buddha. And it's not that we have to do one. It's not that now you've considered Lamrim or now you've considered Lojong, you cannot consider any other Dharma. It's talking about actually taking the teachings and practicing, not just taking the teachings and then kind of not doing enough and kind of, you waste your own time if you don't receive the teachings, put them into practice and continue like that. And, it's not that you can't attend other teachings. If you see other people worry about this, I practice this day, Yidam, but I also have an interest in Mahamudra. So the see Mahamudra retreat come up with teachers I like. And I think, oh, I can't go because I need to practice this deity some more. But what they could do is attend the Mahamudra transmissions and teachings from this teacher and make the connection, go back to practicing the deity, and then when they're ready, practice these Mahamudra instructions. So it's not that you're kind of fixed, you can only attend teachings on one topic. And then verse 14, while still acting always negatively and parted from joy, when a feeling of superiority arises about anything, then cut off my pride and remember my sublime teacher's guideline instructions. So the guideline instructions here are the 4 thoughts. We talk about them preliminary practices really. And by contemplating death and impermanence, we reduce our attachment to reputation and pride because reputation can change. You're not really in control of that. You can be a perfectly virtuous person, but people still have negative thoughts about you. You can be a negative person, but someone else maybe have a positive thought about you. You can't control other people's thoughts, so it's best not to be attached to them. And yeah, so really we need to meditate on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, death and impermanence, karma, suffering in the lower realms. So in that way, if we constantly think about these, we'll be able to progress along the path much easier. Because otherwise we're kind of stuck, You can do whatever you want, but if you're constantly attached, it doesn't benefit. So yeah, we need to have renunciation of samsara. It's not just enough to kind of be attached to samsara and think, oh yeah, well it has play, there's pleasures in samsara, but we have to accept that it's ultimately in the nature of suffering. There's just nothing whatsoever that'll bring ultimate happiness in samsara. Yeah, so we've got this, death and impermanence very important to contemplate. Because if we don't contemplate them, our Dharma practice is never pure. And the Abhidhamma Kosha, Vasubandhu says, if we don't look for means to achieve more happiness when we have one right now, when we're in the lower realms, there's nothing we can do. The chapter 9 in the Abhidhamma Kosha kind of talks all about this, where if we don't look for the means to achieve happiness right now, when we have the ability to, when we don't have the ability, we'll be totally stuck. So with that, that's verse 14 of 28. And we'll stop there because the next 14 verses are quite extensive. So we'll do that next week. Monday night again will be better, I think. So if we do the same time next week, and then we can finish the text. And then if there's interest, we can either go onto another Lojong text or Lamrim, whichever people prefer. So we can go from there. And now we'll do some dedication verses. Okay, so let's think how we need to dedicate the virtue we've generated in the last 50 minutes, 45 minutes, however long it's been, and think, because if we have a moment of anger now, we'll destroy all that virtue, so we need to quickly dedicate it. And then when we dedicate, try and think how the 3 rounds of existence are empty. So the virtue we've generated, the act of dedicating, and the aim we dedicate towards are all empty of inherent existence. So the nature of cause and effect, and that's how our dedications come true. So dedicate for the spreading of the teachings. Dagi Jinye Sape Gewadi Tendano wa Kunla Gampeda Kipa Jetson Los Andapai Tempe Nimpo Vengu Celsius Show. And for the long life of all of our precious teachers, especially His Holiness Dalai Lama. Gangri Vawe always in council Pendan Newa Malu Shomwe Chenweze Wang Tenzing Yatsui Shape Site Badu Chengyu Chi. And then dedicate for the development of these good qualities in our mind of renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. Nichon Sampa Rinpoche Make Panam Kegyuchi Kepan Yampa Mepaya Gongye Gongdu Pelva Shon Changsho Semcho Rinpoche Make Panam Kegyuchi Kepan Yampa Mepaya Gongye Gongdu Pelva Shon Tongyi Tawa Rinpoche Make Panam Kegyuchi Kepan Yampa Mepaya Gongye Gongdu Pelva Shou. And then from Shantideva, as long as space remains, as long as my greaters remain, until then may too remain to dispel the suffering of my greaters. In all my lives, never separate from perfect gurus, may enjoy the magnificent Dharma, by completing the qualities of stages and paths, may quickly attain the state of Vajradhara.